Hello, welcome everybody. Very happy to have you here. And we are going to talk today about catalyzing wealth for change. And we have with us Julia Balandina Jaquier that will introduce very soon. We have also some of our own. We have Peter. Hi, Peter from Zurich, also in the audience. So hello, everybody, and very happy to have you here. And as you know, we started this webinar series almost 2 months ago. And the idea was to see and to be able to talk to prominent speakers with a lot of experience on how to mobilize private capital to spark social innovation, or what we say is solutions that actually respond to environmental and social challenges at the same time that are profitable for the companies that work on that. And we had during these webinars an initial framework that we worked with, and we had different speakers for venture philanthropy, for impact first, for thematic investing, or for public type of portfolio investing, and we talk about responsible investing and impact investing. And I think we're going to change a little bit the tone today, and I like that part because we're going to talk about across different assets, and we are going to focus more on an actor, and this precisely being wealth owners and family wealth owners in some cases more specifically, and how can they choose between all these different approaches, So how in this different framework or continuum of impact that we have, what kind of options are presented to wealth owners and how they choose, what are the advantages, etc., in order to look at this at family wealth mobilized for impact. We usually had Patrick Reichhardt, that is the research fellow at the Lea Center, supporting us with the impact investing side. And today we actually have also another guest. We have Martha Witt. She's a research fellow at IMD. She has a PhD in family business. And I thought that'd be interesting to have a specialist also answering the questions. And you will see that she will be supporting me and you on the Q&A. She will reply to some of the questions directly to you. And also she will provide in a couple of minutes, a little bit of a framework to understand what we're going to be discussing with Julia. So here's Martha, and please, Martha, can you turn on your camera and share with us this framework? So thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Vanina. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and it's a pleasure to present some sort of like an opening framework. So I observed two trends while working with families of wealth of their investment patterns. The first trend describes some sort of a growing interest of the families of wealth to actually go away a little bit or invest less through the family offices and more towards direct investments. Historically, the accumulated liquidity or the liquidity event was a source of funds for investments, and the families of wealth would use their family offices for that. Traditionally, they would also use some other investment vehicles, like philanthropy would be kind of engineered through the foundations, and there would be also family members who would follow their entrepreneurial interests and actually also do some sort of investments. A second trend, I have the feeling that there is a growing desire to foster the entrepreneurship, to embrace family reputation, legacy, and expertise, and that those scattered, let's say, investment efforts are more and more aligned, and they kind of form some sort of like a family investment ecosystem. And right now, there is also a growing willingness, a trend, to give a purpose to those investment philosophies. So when I put those two trends together, I quite often see that there is more and more patient family capital out there on the market, and the families of wealth do transition towards long-term, purpose-oriented investments.
So thank you so much, Martha, for the framework. And I think so now without much further ado, I think we have seen in other previous webinars, and if you want, you can turn off the camera now. Thank you. So we have seen in previous webinars sometimes this silo mentality, that you did some kind of portfolio investing for returns, and then the philanthropic side or the impact side was done through a foundation. And we've seen how these two have been changing and blending. And I think we will discuss more about the different vehicles and the different options with our speaker today. And let me introduce Julia Balandina Jaquier. She's actually the founder and managing director of JBJ Capital Consult. And she's really it's an honor to have her here. She's an international recognized expert in impact investment, to really more than 20 years of experience in. And what I want to point out even more is really the passion she brings to the table. She collaborated with me and moonlights in a lot of my sessions, because I love collaborating with her. And I actually, she's also an author, and I have her book here. I highly recommend it, called Catalyzing Wealth for Change. So she started her career at McKinsey in 1993, and then she held senior positions in ABB Financial Services, AAG Global Investment Group, where she managed the European Direct. And since then, she has worked with leading global families as a trusted advisor, with family offices, with foundations, even with the Swiss and the UK government. So and international development banks. So I think she has this multi-sector perspective and has been able to facilitate the implementation of many mission-driven investments. So I cannot imagine of a more perfect guest and speaker to share her experience with us today. And she will bring also a little bit of a gender lens to the discussion today, because she has a program called Catalyst that really is a holistic fellowship for families of wealth that it has some focus and targets female wealth owners. So thank you, Julia, for being with us. And as you mentioned, or I just mentioned in your bio, you have more than 15 years advising very different investors, governments, families of wealth, international banks. Why do you feel even more passionate about when you talk about families of wealth or family businesses? Why do you focus so much, especially in your later work on this group?
Good morning, Vanina. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for the invitation, Vanina. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. Families of wealth. I indeed have been, throughout the last 20 years, dealing with different types of investors, but I do feel that families of wealth play a very specific role in impact investing. And there are a number of reasons for that. Unlike institutional investors, who are bound by a much stricter fiduciary duty, families of wealth tend to have a much greater flexibility. For quite a number of centuries already, they have been focused on values, and they have been able to act on them. But I think, first, before going on their positioning, maybe it's worth mentioning the fact that our current situation with sustainable development is in a state where we need to invest a very significant amount of capital, about 4 trillion per year, to fulfill the sustainable development goals. And according to Unistat, there's 2.5 trillion, which is currently missing per annum of investments. Where could it come from, right? And what we see that the governments and the philanthropic institutions do not have the resources and not always well positioned to address the challenges that we are facing as a society. On the other side, we see a huge concentration of wealth. If you would see 158 trillion is concentrated in the hands of the wealthiest 1% of the population, representing 44% of the overall wealth. Close to 70% of all the enterprises around the world are family owned, and they represent in certain regions up to 90% of regional GDPs. So it's a huge amount of power and a huge concentration of wealth. And if we look at developmental assistance, OED, the Overseas Developmental Assistance, which is the flows of capital that Western governments send to emerging markets to help in the development, or all the philanthropic capital together, it will represent only 1% of the private wealth. So clearly, the capital and the power to act is in the hands of the private individuals. On the other hand, they're also very well positioned, and excuse my dog, please, they're very well positioned to invest with impact. I mentioned that families throughout their way of dealing with family business and dealing with family wealth, they have been driven by values. And unlike institutional investors, they are able to act on them because they're much more flexible in developing and implementing strategies which are value-driven. So that's number one. Number two, they also have a fast decision-making process. It will take an institutional investor years to develop and implement and approve the new strategy. Families can do it much, much faster. As long as the consensus within the family is there, they can do it much faster. And over the period of years and generations, they have a longer term horizon. They're looking for multi-generational time horizon versus the institutional investors that really have to look at feeding their pensioners, look at their mandates, which are much shorter term. The third point, which is also very important, is family offices and families of wealth have access to different types of capital pools. Philanthropic capital pools, R&D capital pools, traditional investing pools, and impact investing very often demands this blending of different types of instruments in different risk return that you can attach to different types of capital in order to really come and really promote the development of the new innovative ideas. And that brings us to the last point, is that families are able to take pioneer risks, which is very difficult for an institution. Families can risk, can accept lower returns, and can expect higher risk in order to achieve particular type of impact. And throughout their family business and hands-on approach, they can add strategic value, which is also extremely important and much more important in social enterprises, early stage innovations, where companies need not only capital, but a much more amount of hands-holding. So that really well positions families to invest for impact. And I think that makes them really a critical source for developing this investable pipeline of opportunities that can then be scaled through institutional capital.
That sounds extremely interesting, because I think we have seen in the different webinars how this long-term vision is key for impact investment, how blending these different types of capital in order to mitigate risk and to bring in some cases, additionality of things that were not available there plays a role. So have family businesses and I think also having your name at the door also puts some pressure on this part of the purpose side. But have they already played this role that you're mentioning? What has been the role of family of wealth in the past, if you want? Can you give us some examples that you want? Because something I love about your book is precisely that is full of examples and very practical. So
love
your experience.
I mean, the danger is that we can stay for a long time. But basically, yes, absolutely. I think that families have been at the forefront of impact investing for decades, even before the term has been coined, which actually has been coined by Rockefeller Foundation in 2007. But families have been involved in mission-driven investing for much, much longer. And they actually have been the trailblazers. And most notable developments in impact investment space could be traced to the involvement of families of wealth. Let me give you a couple of examples. So in the top left corner, you see Pierre and Pam Omidyar. Pierre is the founder of eBay. And when he has started thinking about their philanthropic strategy, he originally started a traditional foundation, but really then thought that it didn't defy the purpose of driving the systemic change. And he turned it into a philanthropic investment firm, which actually allows him to use the different set of instruments, exactly what Vanina, you were saying, blending. So looking at societal challenge, analyzing the root causes and saying what kind of intervention is it needed. Do we need a grant? Do we need a venture philanthropy or really concessionary type of an investing to let it, get off the ground? Or do we need a traditional venture capital or expansion private equity where the company has already reached a certain scale and they have proved their business model, and therefore you can use just traditional investment approach with the lens of impact in addition. In the top bottom, you see Carol Newell from the Renewal Group. She's American, but she moved to Canada. And already in 1994, she has decided that she wanted to really dedicate all her capital. She inherited money from Newell Rubbermaid Company. She have been a philanthropist for a long period of time, but she just said, look, philanthropy alone doesn't work, right? We have been doing philanthropy for centuries, but it doesn't tackle the root causes of problems. So what she has decided is she has decided to develop a holistic strategy focusing on investments, grants, strategic grants, and collaborations, with the overall idea to catalyze the development of sustainable investment and sustainability in British Columbia. And over the period of the next 20 years, she has invested in more than 200 enterprises, catalyzed hundreds of socially driven companies, was behind such big sustainability rating companies as Sustainalytics, and really has been absolutely catalytic in developing the whole movement in British Columbia. If we come back to the slide to show you some other faces. So, for example, if we move to Europe, you see Steven Brennickmeier, who was working in his family business, CNA, for 30 years. And then when he retired and he was thinking what he wanted to do next, the idea of doing something entrepreneurial with the philanthropic goal caught his attention. Yeah, you see Willow Investments, and in the middle you see Steven's picture. And he invested in funds and direct investments with the idea of really helping social entrepreneurs in the area of microfinance, in the area of education, to really grow and flourish. And again, he's been a trailblazer. He was the first investor in Responsibility, which is Zurich-based, one of the largest impact investment asset managers currently, with over 3 billion of assets under management, or investing in field building by supporting the development of the social stock exchange. Here down at the bottom right corner, you see Tarald Nustad, who is a Norwegian investor, and he invests with his family business, but he also created a Nordic Impact, which catalyzes the power of technology to do good, and also has founded a number of companies that build the infrastructure, like the Catapult Fest, and a number of incubators. Charlie and Lisa Kleisner with the Kale Felicitas Foundations have been the impact investors. They have aligned all their the endowment of their foundation with their mission, and also have been very transparent in publishing the results, being very transparent about the portfolio, the tools they do, the performance that it creates, with the idea to also have a demonstration effect. And they also have created a number of networks like the Tonic or the Tonic T100, which provides again the ability facilitates the involvement of other families in impact investing. But it's not just the purview of European or US investors. If you see Yellowwoods, the Adi at Hoven, which is in the middle here, he is the member of the prominent South African family with the roots in insurance and restaurant business. They own Nando chain of restaurants. For example, when they took over the reins of the family business, which was an industrial holding company, which invested in a number of businesses. In 2007, the first thing that they've done, the next generation sat down and tried to think, what is the purpose of the business? What would make them wake up in the morning? And they said, like, of course, we want to continue to be financially sustainable and financially successful. But that's not what makes us proud. We want our family business to make us proud. And they decided, rather than creating a corporate foundation, to bake impact into the core of the family investment approach. And so they look at the opportunities within the investments that they're making to generate significant societal impact. For example, they identified a problem on the business with a high turnover among the young members, for example, in the restaurant business. At the same time, they've seen that there was a huge unemployment problem among the younger population in South Africa. So they decided to create a Harambee, which was a youth management platform, which helped young people from South Africa, preparing them for the job, because it has been proven that the young person who stays for 1 year in his first job has an 80% larger chance to stay employed throughout the life. In order to amplify impact, then they really then spin out this company in order to really have it cater to more than 200 businesses in South Africa, really increasing the impact. And I can go on and on. I think we'll run out of time, so I'll stop here, Vanina.
No, I find it very interesting, and we just finished with Martha a chapter in a book that was just accepted. We got an email this morning, precisely on a lot of family business transformations around sustainability and how they embedded this investing and this changing of the business in the core. But I also find very interesting what you're mentioning, that a lot of these family business also invest and build the ecosystem, and after they prototype, somehow they involve others. So you provided really excellent examples, but what brought them to impact investment? What do you think motivates these families or family offices or the foundations to really go this extra mile and search for these impactful solutions or fund these impactful solutions?
I think, of course, every circumstance is unique within the family, but you can probably group those motivations into the three buckets: the philanthropic, financial, and personal strategic. And typically you have a combination of the three that are at play. Among the philanthropic ones, a lot of families, like Carol Newell that I mentioned, said that, look, we see impact investing as the more effective philanthropy for certain causes, not for all. Why? Because you're really focusing on scalable systemic solutions. You invest once, and then by reaching financial sustainability, those companies can scale their operations and scale their impact much faster. So focus on market-based approaches is the path to a scalable impact and to tackling the root causes of problems. They also see that impact investing brings a different approach. It brings accountability. If you need to repay the money, you need to create a really robust model that will allow you to function and flourish as the business. And also it's a donor independence. A lot of families feel trapped, cornered by the fact that their grantees are actually very, very dependent on them. And they feel obliged to keep funding them, because without their funding, their programs would stop. If you invest in socially driven business and help them get to this financial sustainability, your impact continues to generate, but they don't really need you anymore. So it's a much more freedom. They also like the partnership approach. A lot of philanthropically minded families are struggling with the idea of donations because it's a little bit humiliating. I am coming from the Western country, provide you with a grant and help you out. If you invest in someone, if you invest in an entrepreneur or provide a loan, a microloan to a micro-entrepreneur in Ghana or in Chile, you are creating a partnership. You dependent on them to generate you the returns. It creates the equality, and it creates a huge empowerment among the populations. Also, there's a holistic alignment. Families have been struggling with the way how their traditional foundations have been working, where they have large endowments which are focused on purely financial returns and totally detached with the mission of the foundation. And in certain cases, they actually cure with grants the problems that they're in part causing through the endowment. So that has been a trouble. And then for families with small amounts of capital, they see a huge impact by recycling the capital. If you provide a grant, the money is gone, right? But if you provide an investment in a social enterprise, for example, even the 0% loan, it comes back and you can recycle. You can give it to another entrepreneur. So that allows you to use money smarter.
We have a question from Will before you go to the financial, because it's about the philanthropy. That's the philanthropic exercises, or he calls, or I think they would say the venture philanthropy has other benefits for families of wealth except this personal satisfaction, like tax rebate. Is it different than the traditional philanthropy?
Venture philanthropy is an approach where you use venture capital methods to social purpose organizations. You may provide still a grant, but this grant will be multi-year, and it will be not necessarily given to develop the programs, but develop the capacity of the enterprises. So a lot of families, even who are willing to provide grants, think that the venture philanthropy is more effective because it builds the capacity of their organization to develop impact. And also it really empowers the organizations to create self-sustainability. Even if it's a charity, a lot of venture philanthropies help charities and NGOs create for-profit enterprises that will really make them self-sustaining. And it's a different tool in the toolbox of the foundation. So families do think that family philanthropy can be approached through strategic philanthropy, still grants, or venture philanthropy, where you take higher risk, but you focus on market-based approaches.
And we had Anish also asking about that there are already several impact investors, large ones, and I think we had some in the webinars here, like LGT, Blue Orchard, PG Impacts, etc. Wouldn't family offices or foundations be better off investing on their funds rather than creating or doing their own investing? What do you think? Or they can do both? No.
It's actually a very good question. A lot of family offices and families started actually with direct investing because it was very, very empowering. You were close to the entrepreneur. You could be, you can feel their passion. But very often, they actually have realized that they're not well positioned to do that, particularly in emerging markets, because they don't have the, people who live there. They don't necessarily understand the local ones. They cannot really add value that much. So a lot of early stage impact investors burned their fingers on direct investing and decided that the better way for them to invest through the intermediaries, at least at the beginning, to learn the ropes, maybe co-invest. And then if they do want to invest in directly, then they would need to set up those ones. But in most of the families, invest at least also through the funds. Very few invest only directly. And the trend has been actually to use intermediaries, or even seed and start intermediaries in order to really implement on a particular strategies that they do. But it also depends on their personal ambitions. If the idea is to create, really to teach the next generation of family members how to do investing, how to manage wealth, then they will go very pragmatically and proactively and be a direct investor as well. And it's also fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the financial side, you were mentioning motivations.
The financial side. Yeah. Of course, philanthropic motivations have been the core. There's no family who is involved in impact investing without the desire to make impact. But many early stage families who invested purely driven by philanthropic motivations realized that impact investments have actually outperformed their traditional investing during the crisis. So they see impact investing as a very interesting and important diversification tool, because some parts of impact investing, like microfinance, like community development finance, is not correlated with the traditional ones and have proven to generate very stable returns and stabilize the portfolio during crisis. They also see that the world is changing, right? Any type of investing tries to identify who are the future winners. And now it's understanding that future winners are the companies that integrate societal concerns into their operations, right? And try to address problems which society needs to address, because that creates a huge market potential, right? Also, they see that it's a risk management. Impact-driven, sustainable company represents a lower risk than a company which has, violations in their labor practices, or is a coal company which can be obsolete in next decade. And I think also families understand that there are huge untapped markets in the base of the pyramid that are waiting for affordable basic products and services. And if the company, through innovative approaches and use of technology, can provide those services at high quality and affordably, it opens up to a huge pent-up demand. So it's prone to grow much faster. But one of the most important things, I think, is the personal strategic motivations. And sometimes families don't talk about it enough, but that's really a huge benefit for families of wealth. A lot of families, after the sale of their family business, notice that there's nothing that can hold them together. The glue that held the family together and generation has been lost. And neither traditional philanthropy or traditional investing cannot provide this bounding effect. But by creating this socially purposeful but also exciting strategy, they can bring different generations together and bring the family together as well. For wealth owners and who are the wealth creators and who used to be at the heart of the companies, they always feel that they want to be still active in their life, and having a more entrepreneurial approach is something that would really use their skills well and be much more fun. Families also worry about how the extreme wealth will influence their children, and they want them to be more responsible stewards of their wealth. And also what families see that the younger generation, and particularly millennials, they are less interested in the traditional industrial family businesses or the traditional family offices. And incorporation of impact objectives into the cooperations of family businesses and family offices attracts this young generation towards being actively involved in management of those companies, creating really succession within the family ecosystem.
Right. So you mentioned or we talked about the impact investment spectrum, and at the very beginning, and I use it on many of the webinars. But where within the family ecosystem do families place impact investing? So Marta introduced a little bit this idea, and I've been talking about the continuum. So what can you tell us about that? Where does impact-driven investing fit?
I think Marta's slide was very good. I think the beauty of impact investing is that it can fit in very different parts of the family ecosystem. Some families decide to place it within their family offices, arguing that we have there already the financial specialist, we have the experience in financial management, we manage our liquid wealth there, so it makes sense to place impact investments there and have, let's say, the family office take care of the execution of the strategy. Or they would say, no, it will be a vehicle which will be managed by the younger generation of the family, of the family members, but they would still place it within the family office. Another way, they might say, look, it's a new activity. The pressure to do it right is really great. So why don't we place it within the foundation so that we have a license that we be free to innovate and take higher risks, and the pressure to perform would be less. And then we will insource it into the family office. And the foundation can be placed within the grant making part of the foundation, which really can be catalytic and innovative, Or you can say, look, we have a huge endowment. And for us, which is a philanthropic family, we want to make sure that our endowment at least doesn't work against the mission of our foundation. So they may place it within the endowment of the foundation. Family businesses are also integrating societal objectives, seeing it as a license to operate and license to grow, particularly in emerging markets. And within the family businesses, you can invest for impact either externally, for example, investing in social enterprises or impact investment funds as a way of insourcing the innovation, or innovating within the family businesses, integrating low-income population or people with disabilities in the supply chain or in the workforce, using community-based distribution strategies, creating new products and services, or even new business lines. So there's an ample way for innovation there. But sometimes family members who are pitching or who are pushing for impact investing don't get the buy-in, and they go on their own way and create their own vehicles outside of the family ecosystem, or even use impact investing as the career path. So it can be done in very, very different ways.
And how do they structure their impact investments? We've seen the sustainable investor, the venture philanthropy. What kind of approaches do they use, and what are you seeing? How is that evolving?
There are a number of approaches that families of wealth are using. Typically, they started with the carve-out, which is segregating a small portion of the family wealth, typically 5 to 10%, and managing it separately. And here you would really then try to see what impact investing can do to you. You would develop a separate strategy for it and manage it. Once you understand that can be done, you typically will try to integrate impact investing in your broader portfolio, where you look through your traditional structure, which is typically split into the various asset classes in your strategic asset allocation, and then you would add impact and sustainable investments in different asset class, and you would let them be within the whole structure. Then once you see that can be done and there are opportunities across asset classes, you would say, well, if I can generate both financial returns and societal impact, why wouldn't I actually target 100% alignment of my wealth with impact? And that requires already a restructuring of the way. It will happen over the time, over the years. It will not happen the same way, but you will already start developing a strategy and path towards this 100% alignment. And the last one is you go beyond your portfolio, where you say, we want to align our capital, but we also want to mobilize additional capital by helping other families invest for impact, for example, sharing our infrastructure, or, for example, by providing the first loss, early stage capital, and being able to mobilize commercial banks into the structures. And while traditionally families tended to go from one approach to another, now because the impact investing has matured and there's enough evidence that it can be done successfully, a lot of families that I see and work with, they from the very beginning target 100% alignment or total portfolio activation, but obviously again it takes time for them to implement it. And then if you show the next slides, obviously depending on where the families place impact investing and what approach they use, they would be using the different blend of impact generating investment strategies. And Vanina has shown you the similar slide before, and they have been shown in the previous webinars. There are different impact generating investment strategies. Impact investing is not the only one, and families tend to integrate them in their philanthropic and investment management. So for example, if the family goes for the total portfolio activation, naturally, they will be including responsible, sustainable impact investing in it. If they're placing it into the programmatic side of the foundation, they will be focusing on venture philanthropy and first impact investing, because there are also some restrictions and because they want to be really close to their mission. But if they do it on the endowment of the same foundation, they tend to go broader and will be again in responsible, sustainable, and thematic investing, because generating market returns would be very important for them to preserve their grant-making capacity.
Right, and I think this is actually very interesting because we've seen the different portions that you're talking about now with different speakers. But I think looking at the from the investor side of the family, the owner of wealth, there is a portfolio of choices and how you can integrate it and how you can make decisions. Time is really going crazy. We're already 40 minutes. So I want to integrate a couple of different things because it seems like it makes a lot of sense for families of wealth to actually do responsible investment and impact investment, and that they're really well positioned to do so. No, but why is not everybody doing it? What are the difficulties? And in these difficulties, I would like to introduce also the gender lens and talk a little bit about female leadership and in this sector. So if we can go, so we make sure that we don't run out of time and include both things. So what are the main challenges and how easy it is for families and for females to get involved in impact investing?
Yes, I think families have had a tremendous amount of interest to impact investing, but getting meaningfully and successfully engaged in it has not been always very easy. The first hurdle is the lack of knowledge. It's a new approach. It is prone to a lot of misunderstandings. There's a lot of confusion about the definitions. You've seen all the spectrum. You will see different versions of the spectrum. And there's a lot of misconceptions where a lot of families originally think of impact investing as a different way of doing philanthropy. Or sometimes now, particularly with the hype of interest to it, they see it as pure greenwashing. So you need to really, help them understand and really educate what is it that impact investing is and how it can be used by families. The second thing that families are struggling with, and here I think the gender lens comes quite prominently, is that a lot of times the members of the family who are introducing the idea of using impact investing are young or less experienced, and they don't have the credibility within the family system. They haven't worked within the family business or the family office. God forbid they're female and young, and it is very difficult for them to be heard by the older, more established family members. And also a lot of family members, and particularly female ones who don't have the financial background, they feel that they don't really they don't speak the financial language, right? And it is difficult for them. And also it creates sometimes, a lack of, self-confidence in being able to push and argue credibly in favor of this approach. The third one is that in addition to young members, female members, less experienced, maybe female members, often being at the forefront of it. When the families turn to their traditional structures of their advisors or, single family offices, very often they will get resistance from them, partially because, the capabilities to do impact investing might be not there, or the incentives may not be there. And it's very difficult to overcome because families tend to work with the same advisors for a longer period of time. They developed a relationship of trust, and overcoming that is challenging. Further, even if the advisors are on board, to get family on board is not very easy. There's a lot of family dynamics. Some of it is really excruciatingly painful and cruel. And if we talk about family foundations, they have very conservative boards, which really treat their fiduciary duty very narrowly and can be actually afraid of impact investing for the risk of, taking higher risks or underperforming financially. And the last things, even if they had everything done and dusted and we want to do impact investing, when you come to actually doing it, you understand that it requires a substantial effort. You need to develop what your values are. how do you want to express them through investments, what kind of impact measurement system you would be using. And sometimes impact investment funds or vehicles are smaller, and it takes much more time and effort to due diligence them. So the cost proportion doesn't always work. So that makes it more difficult. And at the end, what it results in is a gap between wanting to do impact investing, being excited about it, or even allocating capital to it, to actually deploying capital successfully, generating the returns and societal impact.
So we see that what you mentioned exactly is this aspirational gap. And I think we have seen in all of this that sustainable finance and impact investment make sense. But I would say devil is on the execution. No, it is complicated, and we are starting to have more protocols and more ways of how to work it successfully, but it's still hard. So as you have worked in so many different roles and with so many different families, what do you think could help? And also think about this gender lens and to get more women. I know you work with more than 170 families in the book that I showed. So what helped them get involved and actually be as successful as you mentioned in the examples you mentioned at the beginning?
With all the families that I worked with, and for the book, I ask them always, what have been your lessons learned? What can help others, get on board? And I think the first thing what they say is education. Educate yourself about the possibilities and how you can structure impact investing, but educate your other family members, educate your board, your trustees. And in many cases, families actually educated their advisors. They brought them to conferences, bought them books and things like that. So education is very important. Another part is a proper positioning. A lot of family members, and women are actually a very good example of that. They start, positioning it from the duty, from the responsibility, from emotions. We need to save the world, and it clashes sometimes with the notion of fiduciary duty, with the conservatism. So what may help is positioning it differently in saying impact investing helps you reduce risks. It helps you taking advantage of the new opportunities and adjust your investment strategy to the new capital reality, which is changing, and it can bring huge strategic benefits to us as the family.
And that's very interesting. We actually have Jaume from UBS talking also about these issues, and he also mentioned about that trap that if you start with the purpose side, then you never get out of, and you get placed like into the philanthropy or in the NGO bucket, But if you start with the business case, with the risk, with the opportunity, and then go to the purpose actually enhances, but you already are in the return and the strategic version. So I think that's an interesting point of how we frame these things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Here, it's very important to speak the language. So that's why self-education is very important. So you feel comfortable talking about strategic allocation and, diversification and, returns, so that you can argue in the language that they can accept and understand. The second one, develop a strategy. A lot of families move from learning about impact investing, getting excited in it, and then moving into show me deals, let me, I want to do investments. And I think it's important to pause, to really examine what your values are, what kind of impact you want to have, and how should you structure your activities to actually be successful, using the current infrastructure, developing, what kind of issues you want to tackle, what would be your due diligence process, what kind of capital pools you would be using. Because what happens is a lot of families, even those who allocated capital to impact investing, when the deal comes their way, and that's why your question is why aren't they investing in the existing funds, they don't have the framework on how to decide whether it's whether it's an attractive investment or not, or who should be doing it. And that actually sometimes freezes families in inaction. The third one is, it is okay to start small and safe. And I hear it a lot from the families to say, but we're not credible if we only allocate 5%. And if we go to microfinance, which is already developed. No, you are. You can develop an ambitious strategy, but implement it in a phased approach, identify the low-hanging fruits. If you're in a real estate family, going into green real estate or affordable housing would be a low-hanging fruit for you. If you have been in food business and have the flourishing family business, going into the novel foods as a way to invest for impact and in source innovation for your family business would be actually a good way forward. And sometimes doing small pilots. A lot of, for example, next geners actually start by allocating capital themselves and then proving that it can be done, and then, actually going to the larger family office and allocating it. And the last one is...
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that in corporates, and actually is kind of their innovation pipeline, and then they roll it over to the legacy business, and that they start disrupting themselves with all this innovation. So I think it's a really excellent example.
Family office as well.
Yeah.
And the last one is, I'm conscious of time, is be rigorous and collaborate. So one of the biggest learnings of families has been that it needs to be somebody's day job to do impact investing.
Yeah.
If you want to do it by yourself and you have the skills and you have the time, that's fine. But it's actually not as fun as a lot of family members think, because there's a lot of boring parts. But you need to really surround yourself with competent partners, identify very clearly, very honestly what your own skill set is, and then see what are the implementation options. And now the market is huge. You have advisors, you have asset managers, you could outsource the investments completely, you can insource part of it, you can build blended teams. It's important that the teams are bilingual, that they know the financial and impact side of the business, that they're non-conflicted. And then also there's a huge opportunity to collaborate, because the space is very collaborative. A lot of families will share deals, will share infrastructure, and this is also a great way to de-risk the investing and also reduce your costs.
Right. I know in your Catalyst program, since you talked a lot about the importance of education, you work a lot on this education, and you focus especially also on female leadership. So you brought excellent examples, and I will share some of them because we have our last 10 minutes or 8 minutes of the webinar. Can you tell us a little bit what are the key issues in female leadership in the impact investing and in the responsible finance, and what trends have you seen, and what can we learn from them maybe?
Well, I think they're wonderful female wealth owners who've been the leaders in the impact investment space. And here you have Isa Bosch from Dry Linden Foundation, Annie Cheng from RSF Group, Liesl Pritzker from Blue Heaven, Brigitte Mohn, Monique Baer, wonderful women who have not only aligned their portfolios, but have been really very catalytic and really helped build the whole infrastructure. The problem is that we need more, right? It's not that women are better than men, but women represent 50% of the population, but they're hugely underrepresented in the financial industry and also among the impact investors. And they are struggling more than men in being heard within their family ecosystem. And I think that if they are empowered and if they get this a little push through skills and feeling comfortable that finance is not a rocket science and you can understand it very quickly and position it properly, they would really be a very powerful force. Plus, we all know this the transfer of wealth of 60 trillion, which is coming in the next 2 decades. 70% of it will go in the hands of women, right? And I think, having them position it with impact and enabling them to really reflect their values, because the desire is already there. It's a natural desire to be inclusive, to reflect your values, but really building their capability to do it professionally and to do it at scale is what is hugely exciting. And I think it's very important for the development of the market.
And if you wanted to bring some takeaways or learnings to finish up, or if you wanted to mention on what's coming or what should our audience know about it?
I would say that now is a great time to position impact investing because of this coronavirus crisis, which going to really speed up all these developments and transformation of the society, which we were seeing already. Families need to rethink their investment approaches no matter what. It's not related to the values. So introducing their purpose, positioning investing with impact as a smart investing, is an investing which comes to the roots of how families used to invest in the past, is actually a great way to really squeeze more out of your assets than just returns, but really make them generate a significant societal impact, feel really proud about what the wealth is doing, feel more connected, and use it as the tool to generating significant difference.
So thank you very much, Julia. And I think I may have a minute or so for closing. But really, I think we have talked a lot in these webinars about purpose, about intention. And if there is a silver lining from this COVID crisis, is precisely this, I would say that this awareness that we need to respond to societal and environmental challenges together and in collaboration. And also even from the business case of impact investment and responsible sustainable finance, we have seen this decoupling a little bit. There is obviously it's too early, but there are some signs that ESG, that companies that are performing well on environmental, social, and governance issues have flare a little bit better the COVID crisis right now, and there is a lot of research from the global financial crisis. No, so as you were saying, this is a call for action in general to corporates, and I think the interesting part of what can ground on the experiences of family business, of this long-term view, of this engagement of new generations, that I think can extend to non-family businesses too. So thank you so much for your participation, for the great examples, for the great book, and also for always supporting the Lea Center on all our crazy things and programs and courses. And thank you, Marta, too, for joining us with your expert view from the family business. So I hope I meet you next week at the same time for another webinar. And if you want to contact us, you can always contact Julia or myself through LinkedIn. But you also have here, I will share 2 seconds, my email and the email at the Lea Center. And the idea, again, is to build a community of like-minded people and to really push to mobilize private capitals toward impact. So thank you so much, and I see you next week. Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Marta.
I want to thank you for being also a partner in crime in the Catalyst, being the advisor and the speaker and the strategic partner there. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You can count on me. And that's open again. I'm a good partner in crime for impactful and passionate people. So see you around. Good. Thanks so much.
Bye.